Good morning. Welcome. We are looking at this wonderful, wonderful story of David and Ziklag in 1 Samuel 30 and verses 11 to 15. To me, they are the most beautifully described picture of what salvation is all about. And this is the story of an Egyptian slave, one who was a slave of the enemy of David, just as we were slaves of the enemy of Jesus. Before we were saved, as Paul describes in Romans, if we were not slaves of God, we were slaves of sin. Slaves, if you don't serve God, Jesus said, if you're not for me, you're against me. If we weren't actively following Jesus, we were acting on behalf of the enemy. And here is this Egyptian. He had been in the raiding group, the band of Amalekites that had burned Ziklag with fire. He even had confessed it. He even said, we burned Ziklag with fire. He was part of the raiding party. And just like the enemy doesn't care for us, he just uses us while we're useful to him. The enemy had cast this man off when he became too sick to travel with them. They just left him. And for the 3 days that David and his men had spent journeying to Ziklag, those 3 days this poor man had spent sick and abandoned, with no food and no drink. They left him. And when David and his men, Jesus and his followers, when David and his men met this man, they gave him. What did they give him? They gave him bread, a cake of figs and 2 clusters of raisins, and some water to drink. And these things all speak to me of the salvation that Jesus gives. We take bread and wine. He took bread and raisins. He was given them. He was given a cake of figs, and he was given water to drink, water symbolizing the Holy Spirit. He was given everything by David. David's men did not withhold from him what they had because he was an enemy. He'd been abandoned, thrown onto the heap. And David asks him who he is, and he confesses. He says, I'm a young man of Egypt, a servant of an Amalekite. My master left me behind. And just as we come to Jesus and we say, we have sinned, we have done terrible things, we have been on the enemy's side, but here we are, desperate for your help. Here was this man desperate for David's help. And we were desperate for the help of the Son of God who gave his life for us. And what does David say? Will you join me? Will you come with me against this band? Will you change sides? Will you come on my side? And the man says, swear to me by God you will not kill me or deliver me into the hands of my master, and I will take you down to this band. The man changes sides. He says, if you're going to save me, promise me you'll save me, and I'll join your band. And to me, it's the most beautiful picture of the complete and utter acceptance that we have with God. This man joined David's band. This man changed sides, just as we have all changed sides when we came to salvation. And it's interesting that David and his men gave him everything he needed before he changed sides. When they found him, they gave him what he needed to refresh him. And then he was invited to join them. And he was not punished for all the things that he had done. I find that amazing that David did not allow his men, who had been wanting to stone him for allowing the attack on Ziklag to happen. Those men, those 400 men he had with him, not one of them attacked this man. They gave him succor. They helped him. They gave him of their own food to revive him. And this is the generosity of God, that he does not give us what we deserve. He does not give us the punishment we deserve for what we have done. But he simply invites us to join him, to take Jesus as Lord and Master, to take David as Lord and Master in exchange for the master who had abandoned him. And he does. I'm sure he expected David to kill him because he'd been part of this raiding party. But David didn't do that. David took him on. And I think that's wonderful. That is absolutely and completely wonderful. It is such a lovely little cameo of what salvation is all about. And in it are hidden some mysteries to think about. This man was an Egyptian. He wasn't an Amalekite. He was an Egyptian. And Israel came out of Egypt. Egypt was in two ways. This Egyptian in two ways was an enemy of David's. He was an enemy of David's because he was a servant of the Amalekite. But he was also an enemy of David because he was an Egyptian. And the Egyptians were the ones that had kept Israel captive for 400 years. So he was doubly an enemy, wasn't he? And then the other thought is here in the middle of verse 13, end of verse 13, that where he says, "I fell sick 3 days ago." I don't think it's an accident that in this story 3 days appears, because the rescue that Jesus brought about came on the third day. Just on the third day that David and his men arrived at Ziklag. And it's on the third day that this man is rescued. And just like us, on the third day, our salvation was manifest when Jesus rose from the dead. It's just such a wonderful, wonderful picture. I hope you can see what I can see in that passage. Read the rest of the chapter again, if you will, and we'll carry on with the story tomorrow. This wonderful story of rescue and redemption and David and his men. Have a great day. God bless you richly, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.